May 1940. The strongest land army in the world is collapsing, and it's happening in days, not months. German tanks are pouring through the Ardennes, a forest the French swore no army could cross, and racing for the English Channel so fast their own generals are radioing them to slow down. 6 weeks, that's all it takes. France, the country that held the Kaiser for 4 grinding years of World War I, is beaten before summer. The world called it a miracle of German discipline. It wasn't discipline. The men in those tanks hadn't slept in 3 days, and they didn't seem to need to. Each one was carrying a small tube of pills stamped with a brand name almost no American has ever heard, and a chemical every American knows by a different name: crystal meth. This is where it begins. Long before there was a pill, there was a plant. High on the dry plains of northern China and Mongolia, in thin, cold air and rocky soil that kills most crops, there grows a scrubby, jointed little shrub called ma huang. Ephedra. It doesn't look like much. A tangle of stiff green twigs, no real leaves, the kind of thing you'd walk past on a hike and never notice. But if you crush those twigs and boil them into a bitter, woody tea, something happens in your chest. Your airways open. Your heart picks up. The fog lifts. The tiredness in your legs quietly goes away. Chinese healers figured this out a very long time ago. By tradition, it goes back to the legendary Emperor Shennong, the same figure credited with tasting the world's herbs one by one. Ephedra shows up in the oldest medical writing China produced, prescribed for coughs, for congestion, for exhaustion. People were brewing the ancestor of this drug thousands of years before there was such a thing as the United States. Put a cup of that tea in a farmer's hands in 200 BC, and you've handed him the same basic jolt a trucker today gets from a very different white pill. Same chemical family, same open airway, same push. For most of human history, that was the whole story. A mountain shrub, a folk remedy, a cup of bitter tea. Then chemistry caught up with it. In the 1880s, a Japanese chemist named Nagai Nagayoshi pulled the active ingredient out of ma huang and gave it a name, ephedrine. And in 1893, he did something nobody had done before. He rearranged that molecule in the lab and produced a stronger, meaner cousin of it, a synthetic stimulant far more powerful than anything the plant made on its own. A few decades later, in 1919, another Japanese chemist crystallized it into a clear, glittering solid. That was the first batch of what the world would eventually call methamphetamine. It was made in a laboratory in Tokyo, and for years, almost nobody knew what to do with it. It sat there, a solution waiting for a problem. The problem showed up in Berlin. In 1937, a chemist named Fritz Hauschild was working for a Berlin pharmaceutical company called Temmler Werke, and he was chasing something specific. He'd watched American athletes at the 1936 Berlin Olympics use a stimulant to gain an edge, and he wanted a German version. Something stronger. He landed on that old crystallized compound from Japan, refined it, and Temmler patented it. They gave it a brand name that sounded clean and modern and medical: Pervitin. In 1938, it hit the German market, and it hit like nothing before it. No prescription needed. You could buy it right off the pharmacy shelf, next to the aspirin. And the pitch was intoxicating all by itself. Tired? Take Pervitin. Sad? Take Pervitin. Nervous, unmotivated, dragging through a double shift. Pervitin would fix it. It didn't just wake you up. It made you feel capable, confident, sharp. It deleted the part of you that wanted to quit. Berlin lit up with billboards for it. Doctors handed it out. Factory workers took it to survive night shifts. Secretaries took it to power through the day. Students took it to cram. Housewives took it to get the housework done and feel good doing it. A candy company even started selling boxed chocolates spiked with methamphetamine, marketed to overworked women as a little afternoon lift. Imagine a box of Russell Stover at the CVS register, except every piece is dosed with speed, and that's a legal advertised product. That was Germany in 1938. A whole country quietly buzzing, and almost nobody calling it a drug. And then a military doctor noticed. His name was Otto Ranke, and he ran a defense physiology institute for the German army. Ranke looked at this civilian craze and saw a weapon. In September 1939, He ran a trial. He dosed 90 university students and measured them. Their focus, their stamina, their willingness to take risks, their appetite, their need for sleep. The results thrilled him. On Pervitin, people worked longer, cared less about danger, stopped feeling hungry, stopped feeling tired. Ranke himself became a daily user, writing in his notes that a man could stay productive for a day and a half straight with no real fatigue. So he wrote it up. A recommendation, sent up the chain. This drug could help Germany win the war. A physiologist's report. A conclusion typed on a piece of paper and passed to the high command. This decision seemed small at the time. It was not. Before we go further, if you're new here, this channel covers the hidden histories behind the things that shaped the world. Real stories, real numbers, no filler. New video every week. Hit subscribe so you don't miss it. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Whether you're in Texas, New York, or somewhere in between, I always want to know. The German High Command took Ranke's report and did the logical, monstrous thing with it. They put the drug in the ration. In the spring of 1940, as Germany prepared to invade France and the Low Countries, the Temmler factory shifted into overdrive. At its peak, pressing as many as 833,000 tablets a day. Between April and July of that year, more than 35 million 3 milligram doses of Pervitin were manufactured and shipped to the German Army and Air Force. 35 million pills for one campaign. Enough to dose the entire population of a state the size of Ohio several times over. The soldiers had nicknames for them. Tank crews called it Panzerschokolade, tank chocolate. Pilots called it Stuka tablets and pilot salt. Here's why it mattered, and it's simpler than the mythology around it. The whole theory of Blitzkrieg, lightning war, depended on speed. Punch a hole, pour through it, and move faster than the enemy can think or regroup. Don't stop, don't consolidate, don't sleep. The tanks could run around the clock. The problem was always the men inside them, because men are not machines, and men get tired. Pervitin was the German answer to human biology. The tank columns that knifed through the Ardennes and crossed the Meuse at Sedan in May 1940 drove for something like 3 days on almost no sleep, crews chewing tank chocolate to stay upright and alert while the world blurred past. Picture the inside of one of those machines. It's cramped, it's deafening, and it's hot as a running engine, because it is one. The air is thick with diesel and cordite. The driver's hands haven't left the controls in a day and a half. His jaw is working, his eyes are wide and dry, his heart is going like a jackhammer, and he feels fantastic. That's the terrible genius of the drug. It doesn't just keep you awake. It makes the 18th hour feel like the second. And they covered ground so fast they outran their own supply lines and their own orders. One German medical historian put it bluntly, calling Blitzkrieg guided by methamphetamine. That's not a metaphor. Part of the reason France fell in 6 weeks instead of 6 months is that one side had chemically deleted its need for rest and the other side hadn't. Think about the scale of what that drug helped take. In under 2 months, Germany overran an area larger than the entire state of California and knocked out the army that a generation earlier had fought it to a standstill for 4 years. The fastest conquest of a major power in modern history. And a big piece of the engine was a pill you could have bought over the counter 18 months earlier. But there was already a crack in it, and it was showing up in the men who mattered most. During that same French campaign, senior officers started dropping. A tank division commander had a heart attack an hour after taking his pill. Others suffered chest pains, collapses, cardiac episodes after weeks of daily dosing. The drug was winning the war and quietly turning on the people fighting it. The high command noticed the bodies. It did not stop. Because here's the thing, nobody selling a miracle ever mentions. Methamphetamine doesn't give you energy, it steals it. From tomorrow, from next week, from your heart, from your mind, and hands it to you now, all at once, with interest coming due. You take it and you feel unstoppable. Then it wears off, And the crash isn't just tiredness, it's a black, bottomless exhaustion, often with depression riding on top of it. So you take more to climb back out. And the second dose does a little less than the first, so the next time you take a little more. Your body stops sleeping right. Your temper goes. Then come the worst things: paranoia, hallucinations, hearts simply failing in men in their 20s and 30s. On the Eastern Front, where the war turned into a frozen meat grinder that lasted years instead of weeks, this played out at horrifying scale. Soldiers dosed to stay awake through nights that could kill you by cold alone, taking more and more just to function. One panzer officer, describing combat in Ukraine in 1943, wrote about sliding into what he called a world of bright indifference, a place where danger lost its edge and his own strength felt impossibly large, right before the sleepless nothing swallowed him. A young infantryman named Heinrich Böll wrote letters home from the front, begging his family to mail him more Pervitin. Böll survived the war and went on to win the Nobel Prize in Literature. Even the men who lived carried it out with them. Germany's own health officials had seen it coming. As early as 1939, the Reich's top health official was sounding alarms, and the drug was formally restricted, made prescription only, then placed under the country's narcotics law in 1941. The orders were widely ignored. When soldiers ran out at the front, they had family ship it from home. Quick question before we go on, and I want you to actually answer this one in your head. How much methamphetamine do you think ends up inside American bodies in a single year? Street meth and prescription stimulants combined. Just hold your number. We'll come back to it, and I promise it's bigger than you think. I'm not going to editorialize yet. Hold the anger, because so far this is a German story, and you might be sitting there thinking this was their problem, their war, their poison. It wasn't. It was ours too. We just told it to ourselves with better branding. While Germany was running its war on Pervitin, the United States had built its own stimulant empire, and in some ways, we got there first. The parent chemical, amphetamine, was first cooked up in a Berlin lab back in 1887, then forgotten for 40 years. It got its real second life in America. In 1927, an American pharmacologist named Gordon Alice resynthesized it in California while hunting for a better asthma treatment, and he sold the rights to a Philadelphia drug company you've never heard of but should: Smith, Kline and French. In 1932, they put it on the market as the Benzedrine inhaler, an over-the-counter decongestant, sold freely, no questions asked. It didn't take long for people to figure out that if you cracked the inhaler open and swallowed the strip inside, you got very, very awake. College students used it for exams. Truck drivers used it for long hauls. Writers used it to work all night. Smith, Kline and French watched all this and did the entrepreneurial thing. They started selling it as tablets, marketed for depression, for obesity, for low energy, for what one ad campaign literally called discouragement. By the late 1930s, the wonder drug was on the cover of Time magazine and in medicine cabinets across the country. Then came the war, and America did exactly what Germany did. We put stimulants in the kit. American GIs got Benzedrine as standard issue. Marines carried it into the meat grinder at Tarawa in November 1943. Paratroopers took it into the D-Day drop in June 1944. Bomber crews ran on it through night raids over Europe. By the end of the war, by one historian's estimate, as many as 16 million Americans had been introduced to amphetamine through military service. 16 million. That's roughly the entire population of the New York City metro area coming home with a chemical habit in their duffel bag. And when the soldiers came home, the drug didn't demobilize. It moved into the kitchen. Amphetamine got repackaged for peacetime as the housewife's helper. Diet pills to stay thin. Pep pills to get through the day. Mood brighteners for the suburbs. The same company that armed the troops hired a researcher to study whether the stuff was safe for weight loss, and, surprising no one, he decided it was. Methamphetamine specifically, the harder German-style molecule, entered American medicine too, sold under brand names as a prescription pill. And the numbers got absurd. Diet doctors were buying amphetamine tablets by the 100,000. One reportedly paid $71 for a batch of 100,000 pills and turned around and sold them for $12,000. By one estimate, 2 billion tablets a year moved through the weight loss pipeline alone. This was the original Mother's Little Helper, a full decade before the Rolling Stones wrote the song about it. Suburban America was running on speed and calling it a diet. By the 1950s, this was just normal, sanctioned, doctor recommended. American as a chrome-trimmed refrigerator. That was the false dawn. A whole country decided the danger was behind it, that this was medicine now, that respectable people in lab coats had it handled. What I haven't told you yet is that the people making these pills already had the evidence in hand, and they kept the factories running anyway. Let me give you the number that should end the "it's just medicine" argument forever. By 1969, American drug companies were manufacturing somewhere between 8 and 10 billion amphetamine tablets a year. Not total, per year. That's enough to hand roughly 40 pills to every single man, woman and child in the United States annually, a country of 200 million people, and the pharmaceutical industry was producing 40 doses of speed for each of them. Now, where did all those pills go? Not to sick people. In 1969, in hearings on what would become the Controlled Substances Act, witnesses estimated that about half of all the amphetamine being produced in America was diverted, sold out the back door, straight into the black market. Half of billions every year. And this wasn't hard to pull off. A 1964 CBS investigation showed that with a few $100s and some fake company letterhead, a person could order literally millions of tablets directly from manufacturers, by mail, no real questions asked. Here's where I have to be straight with you, because I don't want to sell you a fairy tale. There is no single smoking gun memo here. There's no leaked document where a CEO calculated the exact body count and signed off on it in dollars and cents. I went looking for it. It isn't there, but you don't need the memo. The arithmetic is the confession. Billions of pills a year, half going to the street. Government investigators saying so out loud, in public hearings, on national television. And the industry kept the presses running. This is the part that should make you angry. And it should make you angry at Americans, in American boardrooms, with American lawyers signing off. Because this wasn't something foreign that happened to us. We built it, we profited from it, and we knew 8 to 10 billion pills, half of them diverted, every year. Say it a few times until it stops sounding like a statistic and starts sounding like what it is. Eventually, Washington acted. In 1970 and 1971, the Controlled Substances Act finally put amphetamine and methamphetamine into Schedule II, the tier reserved for drugs with a high potential for abuse, filed right alongside cocaine and morphine. The government started capping how much the industry could legally make. And it worked, sort of. Legal production dropped hard, but the demand didn't go anywhere, so the supply just went underground. Illicit labs sprang up to fill the gap, and by the 1980s, homemade methamphetamine was a rural American epidemic all its own. Which brings us to the law that's the real gut punch of this whole story. In 2005, Congress passed the Combat Methamphetamine Epidemic Act. If you've ever wondered why you have to show your ID and sign a logbook to buy Sudafed, why the cold medicine with pseudoephedrine in it lives behind the pharmacy counter now instead of on the shelf, this is why. The law locked up the household chemical that small-time cooks were using to make meth in their kitchens and campers. And on its own terms, it was a triumph. Seizures of those small domestic meth labs cratered, from around 23,700 in 2004 down to about 1,600 by 2018. The Breaking Bad cook in the RV became a dying breed, but the demand still didn't go anywhere. So the Mexican cartels stepped into the vacuum, and they switched to a completely different industrial method. One built on cheap chemicals that are sold everywhere in the legal economy, in fuels and solvents and dozens of ordinary products. There was nothing to lock behind a pharmacy counter because the ingredients are in 100 legitimate supply chains. So production didn't shrink, it exploded. Bigger, cheaper, and far more potent than the homemade stuff ever was. Journalists tracking it call the result super meth, and it now makes up the overwhelming majority of what gets seized in this country. We didn't kill the supply. We handed it to professionals and made it stronger. And this new version didn't just kill more people, it changed what the drug did to the ones who lived. The reporters and doctors following it describe a wave of severe, lasting psychiatric damage, paranoia, hallucinations, people coming apart on the sidewalks of American cities in ways the older drug rarely caused. It filled homeless encampments from Los Angeles to the small-town Midwest. The pill Fritz Hauschild built to delete human weakness had learned to delete something much larger. And the bodies followed. In 1999, methamphetamine was involved in about 547 overdose deaths in the United States. By 2023, that number was roughly 35,000, from 547 to 35,000 in a single generation. Even now, with overall overdose deaths finally starting to fall, meth is the exception that keeps climbing as a share of the wreckage, from about 23% of all overdose deaths in 2019 to roughly 36% in 2024. The newest wave mixes it with fentanyl, so the crash and the poison arrive in the same hit. That's around 35,000 Americans a year tied to this drug, more than half of everyone the United States lost in the entire Vietnam War. Every single year. The industry knew in the 1960s, Washington knew by 1971, and a version of the drug that drove tanks into Paris is killing Americans at that rate right now, today. While you're watching this, we just call it something else. So, let me bring this all the way home, into a place you'll stand inside within the next 24 hours. Go to your pharmacy. Walk up to the counter where they keep the controlled stuff. Because methamphetamine, the actual drug, the exact same molecule the Wehrmacht took into France, is a legal, FDA-approved prescription medication in the United States, right now. It's sold under the brand name Desoxin, 5 milligram tablets. It's approved to treat ADHD in children as young as 6 and short-term obesity. It's distributed by a small company out of Tampa, Florida. The DEA sets an annual quota for exactly how much legal methamphetamine American factories are allowed to make. And if you read the FDA's own label for it, it tells you the truth in black and white. Prescription Desoxin and the meth sold on the street are chemically, essentially the same drug. The label warns, plainly, that it can kill without warning. Zoom out, and it's even bigger than that. Methamphetamine is just the hard edge of a whole family of legal stimulants descended from that same 1930s molecule. Adderall, Ritalin, Vivance. And there's a reason a doctor reaches for a stimulant when a child can't sit still. Back in the late 1930s, an American psychiatrist named Charles Bradley gave Benzedrine to kids with behavioral problems and found that, strangely, it calmed them down and sharpened their schoolwork. That one observation is the seed of how we treat attention disorders to this day. Well over 20 million Americans take a prescription amphetamine on a regular basis. So many that when the supply hiccuped a couple of years ago, it made national news as the Adderall shortage. This drug isn't in some dark corner of American life. It's in your medicine cabinet. It's in the backpack of the kid down the street. It's in your co-worker's desk drawer, and in the childproof orange bottle behind the counter, and in the overdose that shut down a road in your county last month. It's the pantry, the pharmacy, and the gutter, all at the same time. And most people never notice it's all one story. Here's the reframe, and I want you to sit with it. The drug that powered a dictator's Blitzkrieg, that helped conquer a continent, that burned out the men who took it, that flooded American suburbs disguised as a housewife's little helper, is the same drug a doctor can legally hand to a first grader for schoolwork, and the same drug in the needle that ended somebody's life 3 zip codes from where you're sitting. It started as a bitter tea brewed from a desert shrub. It ended up in a tank in France, in a diet pill in 1955, in a black box FDA warning, and in the American overdose numbers that come out every year. That's not a coincidence. That's one straight line. And we walked every step of it with our eyes open. The distance between what we tell ourselves, that we're a country of free choices and fair markets and agencies that keep us safe, And what this one drug actually reveals about how we operate is the whole story. How many things in your medicine cabinet started out as somebody's secret weapon? And who decided, in a room you were never in, that it was safe enough for you? Sit with that one. I'm not going to answer it for you. Have you ever taken a prescription without once asking where it really came from? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. If this is the kind of story you want more of, the real history behind the things that run your life, subscribe. Hit the like button. It tells me you want to keep going deeper. And share this with someone who thinks they already know how the world works. Because the next time you're standing at the pharmacy counter, waiting on a prescription, remember this. The drug that drove tanks into Paris is sitting on a shelf 10 feet away, with a dosage printed on the side and a child-proof cap on top. Same molecule, same high, same crash. We just decided to call one of them medicine, and now you can't unsee it.